My name's Dave Armstrong. I work for Jensten Insurance Brokers. Our office, it used to be, as of 2 years ago, used to be Covershire, which was owned by one of the co-founders of GB Landlords, Janet, who's sitting at the back of the room there. And you know, we've kindly been allowed to continue to support GB Landlords where we can, and also, you know, give us much information about landlord insurance as possible. So what I thought I'd talk about today is certainly in the last, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years, we have seen quite a lot of increases, or steady increases in the amount of claims being made. So what I wanted to do is just sort of set the expectations of what insurers commonly expect of landlords, to help increase the chances of you having a successful claim, and hopefully not having to ring your broker and say, they're saying this, can I have some help? And also just a little bit about how insurers have adapted following the implementation of the Renters' Rights Act, as I've just nearly fell over. So it goes without saying, important disclaimer, this is not advice because I'm not insured to give it, but again, it is just to highlight what insurers expect in certain elements of claims, just so I don't get a professional indemnity claim made against me. And even if you do sort of follow what insurers say, for whatever reason or another, there may still be another section of a policy where the damage might not fall out, the damage might fall outside the criteria, or there's another section that supersedes what you're trying to claim for that might exclude it. Okay, so who here has one of them on their properties, and that's circled in red? Yeah. So just a question, if a storm, because we've had quite a few over very recently, if a storm takes off or rips part of the felt or anything like that, do you think you're automatically covered for it to be replaced? No. Well, the answer is no, because, and I don't know if you can see that very well, there's quite a lot of terms and conditions in insurers' wording, and these are just a few examples. So this insurer, what they want is for you to carry an inspection of the roof at least once every 5 years by a competent contractor, and any remedial works done immediately. The usual one is anywhere between sort of 3 and 5 years. Or 2 years rather, as this example here. That's RSA, or who are called Intact now. That's AXA. And again, you'll see where I've highlighted failure to comply with those conditions mean you'll not have a claim. So again, it's just really important to just bear that in mind. There can be other insurers as well which want an annual inspection. Not that many of them, and we try and avoid them where we can, because landlords have got enough costs to put up with at the moment. But also some actually say, so if there's a felt on timber flat roof that hasn't been touched for more than 10 years, it must be inspected within 12 months of that policy incepting. And again, if it's not, then you'll have no claim. Okay.
So can I just ask, what about the modern ones, the epoxy ones, when it's no longer felt?
It's a similar principle. Insurers, even though this technology's been in for a while, they still class them as felt on timber because they haven't updated the list. So when we get a rubber membrane, or like what you've just said there, we'll just have to put it down as felt on timber, but the same terms will apply in terms of it being inspected.
People who do them,
yeah, I know.
Incredibly long warranties on them.
Yeah.
Compared with those.
Yeah. I mean, if there's, what I would say is if you unfortunately have a situation where there's a warranty on them, but for whatever reason you still need to claim, is just speak to your broker, speak to the insurer, and just say, this is what's happened, where do I stand? And again, top tip, make sure you review your terms and conditions and abide by them as best you can. Okay, so that's flat roofs. So does anyone know what the meaning of condition of average is? You stop cheating. And you as well, John, stop cheating. So basically, what it means is if your sum insured, so the rebuild cost or the reinstatement value, whatever you want to call it, if that's not adequate, they'll apply something called a condition of average, or in other words, underinsurance, which you've probably heard that bandied about quite a lot. An example of this, so say a rebuild cost of a property is 400 grand. You actually declare to the insurer that it's 200. Have a claim. Well, I was going to ask what you think, but I've already given it. So essentially, the property is 50% underinsured. So that means any claim you make, regardless of what it is, whether it's a sudden burst pipe, any white goods, no matter what it is, how big or small, your claim gets reduced by 50%. So it's really, really important to make sure that your sums insured are adequate from the outset. Now that can be from a rebuild cost assessment. We use a company called Rebuild Cost, which I'll come on to in a minute. They'll do a desktop survey of the property. And if you get a valuation done for a mortgage, chances are the surveyors will include the rebuild cost in there. Now, it doesn't just apply to landlord's insurance. Just a quick side note. Does anyone here own like their own business? Okay, I see a few heads nodded. So have you got things like contents, computers, stock and whatnot? Yeah, same thing applies. And I've got a client at the minute who's going through that exact problem. Didn't have enough cover for their computers, hadn't updated it or reviewed his contents, and I think he's about 40-50% short. So he's not going to get paid the full amount for his content. So it doesn't just apply to landlord's insurance, like I say. So I found this on the internet. It's from 2024, from Rebuild Cost Assessment. In the UK, including Northern Ireland, obviously, 76% of buildings are currently uninsured. That's a problem, massive problem. The worst areas, I think is that Wales? Oh God, I can't even see that. I think Wales and Northern Ireland are in the 80s. If you break that down further, most of them, well, commercial properties, strangely, is a lot more than that. But if we look at area specific, that's in the northeast in Yorkshire. That's 80% of properties that are underinsured. It's a massive problem at the minute. So, like I say, when you come into your insurance, make sure your sums insured are adequate. And they also say it's good to get an evaluation done about every 3 to 5 years. So yeah, that's that. So one of the other common things that we see is, has this happened to anybody's properties? You take a guess. They're not that great images. They're not images from our clients' claims. I just found them online. But malicious damage is quite common and is becoming more common. So most insurers, subject to your policy excess, will only give you cover for up to £5,000 for any malicious damage. Now, one insurer recently has just actually increased that to 15,000, which is probably the highest out there at the moment. Now, there is also a lot of caveats to it. In order to have a successful claim, they insist on regular inspections, so they could be every 6 months. Some insurers even say every 3 months, and it needs to be documented. Check that you've obtained the relevant proof of ID, written references and credit checks as well. And where there's any evidence of illegal cultivation of drugs, insurers will just exclude it altogether. Okay. And again, top tip, read your terms and conditions. Anyone got any questions about that, or just sort of claims in general or insurers in general? I haven't got all night, unfortunately. I was half expecting to be peppered with rotten tomatoes and everything. Does that?
If you get someone out to inspect flat proofs, do they have to have like a qualification? Like, is there something, or can you just
Some, yeah, no, some say they want, you know, like a qualified roofer and not just, you know, your average Joe from over the road who might have done a little bit of tiling back in the day. It would have to be a you know, a qualified.
Is there a certification in roofers? Most of them are just self-serve, the ones I know.
I'm not 100%.
I think it's something like the Federation of Master Builders, but we sign up through.
Yeah, yeah. So that's, I hope that was useful. The next thing I wanted to, oh, so, yeah.
Particularly for intermediate sort of damage, is there any way you can find out whether it's actually worth claiming? Like, can you add on your excesses, and will it affect your premium next year?
That's a good question. I mean, really the insurer's policy wording states if there has been an incident that could result in a claim, it needs to be reported to the insurer. What will happen then is if you don't take that claim any further, it'll just sit on your file for 3-5 years, whichever the insurer does. What I always say is we can have those proactive conversations with insurers and just say, you know, if we think it's a delicate balance between it being covered or not, we'll just give them a ring and say, listen, from your experience, what are the chances? But also, like you've just said, you know, I'm sure you've got experience of costs in terms of to replace certain things or repair certain things. So if your excess is £500 and I don't know, you know, a new I'm trying to think of an example to use. You know, something that's damaged costs like 600 quid. Yeah, exactly. It's not really worth it because not only have you got your excess to take into account, but it's the impact over the next 5 years in your premium. That's not to discourage anyone from claiming. Ultimately, that's why you buy, you know, that's what you buy the policy for. But yeah, it is good to just think, you know, financially, is it really viable? You know, is that...
In our experience, if it's and we just do it. We haven't made a claim because we haven't had one burn to the ground yet.
Yeah, yeah, and you know that's an insurer's dream, to be honest. But I think with, you know, and if you're in that position, great. But I think where we're finding more claims coming in is, you know, the costs of repairing something is probably a hell of a lot more now than what it was sort of pre-COVID, for example. You know, people's margins are tighter and might not be able to have that flexibility to just go and do things privately. But it's always worth having a conversation with your insurer or your insurance broker, you know, just to get their view on it and give you the facts on it from their experience. Lastly, so the Renters' Rights Bill, how insurers have adapted. In reality, not much at all. What I would though say is I don't want to, you know, preach to the choir here, but I presume do you know what your loss of rent cover covers you for on your policy? So if, in the example you use, you had a fire, burns to the ground, obviously your tenant can't live in there, you can't get the rent. So during the time from the building being reinstated back to what it was before the fire, any rental income you've lost during that period, you'll be able to claim for as part of the claim for the building. Now, even though ASTs are a thing of the past, you can still get 12, 24 month and 36 month indemnity periods. So just be mindful that, you know, that if say if you've got like a commercial building, for example, and you've only got 12 months worth of cover, but if it's a fairly big building, chances are it's going to take more than 12 months to rebuild. So just bear that in mind, because that limit does still exist. A couple of insurers now, following the law to refuse allowing tenants to have pets, some insurers have upgraded their cover to include a little bit for pets, so any pet damage. Some have launched separate products for that. So it's just something to bear in mind in there. And as I say, one insurer, as of Monday, I think it was, have changed their policy as standard to cover at least £5,000 damage for any one claim, in an aggregate across over a 12-month period of 5,000. So we're seeing that quite a lot. Now, we've also had quite a lot of inquiries from landlords for rent guarantee cover. I think there's a bit of a misconception as to what that actually is. Does anyone want to have a crack at what they think it means, or where it would step in? Sorry?
If the tenant doesn't pay that rent.
Sort of. It's not as straightforward as that, unfortunately. So what it is, so you get up to £50,000 legal expenses, and you can claim up to £2,500 a month for any rent, but that doesn't kick in from day one. So if a tenant misses one payment, you can't then just use this cover. There has to be, it can be 2 to 3 months in arrears, or where you're currently going through the eviction process or about to start going through the process, because the insurer will then look to assist with that legal process. But like I say, you can't claim for it unless there's already some sort of action being pursued. Another thing is, similar to the malicious damage example I used, if you haven't done your ID checks, your credit checks, things like that, you're not, the policy, you can't get my words out, you're not covered. And also, if those searches have come back and a tenant is found to have adverse financial history, CCJs, again, the insurers won't touch it. Other than that, it's probably something worth perhaps bearing in mind in the future.
Did you say every tenants have got CCJs?
Yeah. I had one a couple of months ago, and I rang 4 or 5 insurers, and they said if they've got CCJs, then it's a no-go. So, yeah. And we find it costs about £200 a year per property, which is all right if you've got a couple, but if you've got like 10 to 20, I'm not good at maths, but that's a lot. It's like an extra probably 2, 3, 4 grand on top of your actual premium. Anyone got any other questions?
Just away from the property side of it now, things like public liability insurance, if one of your tenants gets injured or hurt in the property, or if a visitor comes to the property, they get hurt or injured.
Yeah, so that's property owner's liability, and all insurers included as standard. So you've got that cover already. It ranges from, the most common amount is 2 million, some is 5 million. But yeah, that's included. But it is, I think it's as long as someone is lawfully there or should be there. Like, say, I don't know if it was like a trespass or someone coming in, they shouldn't have been there. I don't think it'll cover for them. I would have to check. But generally, that is that's included as standard.
With the rent guarantee, if you said it doesn't kick in after month one, obviously, but you've got legal cover, should you then get in touch with them after the first month hasn't been paid?
Certainly worth.
Advise me on what to do.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I can't remember the exact wording off the top of my head, but I think they do like a free, sort of like a free advice service as well. But yeah, it's absolutely worth having a conversation with them, or get your broker to have the conversation with the insurer, and then they can advise whatever they say. But yeah, it's probably definitely worth having a chat with them. It's always best to be open and honest with them. I know it's difficult because it's insurers, and you just constantly hear, you know, they'll think of any way to get out of claiming, but in my opinion, it's better to be open and honest because they'll appreciate it more. So yeah, upfront conversations, I would absolutely recommend that.